Okay, so here is a process video for making sci-fi gun sounds. Obviously, this is not like the only way to make it, but this is a way I found kind of worked out for me for this particular instance. I started with a sound that I recorded about a year ago. It was me and a friend of mine recording the sound of a slinky being stretched out and then hit with a metal pen. This is kind of similar to what Ben Burt used to make the gun sounds for Star Wars. So this is what it sounded like when we recorded it. It's rather quiet, so I had to boost the level quite a bit. You can also hear in the left speaker, the left headphone, you can kind of hear this clicky bit at the end and a lot of room noise. So what I did to try to eliminate that is I did pan hard right, so you only get the right speaker, then bounced it in place and then made it mono. There's probably a couple ways to do this, but what this is basically doing is it's taking only the right side of the stereo track and then bouncing that out to its own mono track essentially. And then I made this track mono here, as you can see the one dot instead of the two dots. And what this gives you is just this one hard pan center, no, not hard pan, but just a centered track of the laser sound. Then what I did is I boosted it a lot because it was really, really quiet. I think I gave it like 2 or 12 dB worth of gain. Just made it a bit louder. I also time stretched a little bit. I've found that in terms of pitching up and down, the better way to do it is to use the speed time stretch from FlexTime in Logic. The pitch shifters itself, like the little plugins, they don't keep a lot of, they kind of add extra stuff in. They add, because of the algorithms or whatever behind it, it adds additional noise and sounds that I'm not really looking for, whereas I found this kind of to be the most true representation of a pitched up and pitched down because you're also changing the speed as well. I also added a couple of sounds to kind of shape it a little bit here. First off was this kind of just explosion sound, which you can barely hear. I'll turn off the EQ and bring it up a little bit. So you can kind of hear it's just this big explosion sound that I also EQ'd, so you only get the really lowest bit that kind of only really shines through when it's, you know, you have really big subwoofer speakers that can handle it. Next I have the sound of an M4, just kind of standard assault rifle, which I also cut the top half off of because you get this like clicky sound, and I found that it really didn't work for the context of the game. It's not as a lot of moving parts with the guns. It's not like a shell. It's kind of a charge. So I'm only using just the kind of explosion gunshot part of it as opposed to the mechanical bits. So you get just a good solid kind of mid-range hit. And then here to kind of fill up the top end, I found that the sound of a whip cracking sounds kind of cool. And so I brought that down a little bit. And I think that kind of does a good job of filling out this kind of high crack at the very, very upper end. I guess upper middle. And then a little bit of a machine gun. Kind of another lower mid impact. And then like a Smith & Wesson kind of pistol, just to fill out a little bit more like the upper mids. So I'm kind of trying to fill out the soundscape using different parts of different sounds. So I use this as kind of the main body of it and kind of have this be like the main voice. I use this for some, you know, under really, really low frequency stuff. This for kind of mid frequency, high mids and highs, low mids, higher mids as well. So kind of trying to fill out the entire sound frequency spectrum with lots of different textures to kind of get what I want out of each individual sound. And then what I wanted to do, so this is what it sounds like, just kind of everything mixed together. Works kind of well, but I wanted to add a little bit more spaciness to it and kind of give it a little bit more cohesiveness and character. So I added a flanger, mixed it quite down a little bit. I didn't want it to sound completely ridiculous. This is what it would sound like with 100%. Sounds kind of cool, but not really what I'm looking for. I still want to retain some of that characteristics of the initial sound files. So I just kind of used about a quarter of it and gave it this really interesting kind of filter sweep flanger sound. And then I added a compressor to it. On the compressor, I gave it kind of a slower attack so it didn't kick in for a little bit, and then a faster-ish release. Made sure it auto-gained to about 0 dB because it'll end up at -3 once I'm done, which is what I'm looking for. And then not super duper high on the ratio either. I didn't want to completely smash it. I just kind of wanted to shape it a little bit so it hits really hard and then kind of cuts off a little bit towards the end. So that's how I went about making this sound effect for a laser gun. Hope you enjoy and hope you learned something.